Welcome back to the channel, everyone. So this might look a little strange and I'm probably barely visible on here, but I wanted to set the scene, if you will, for what it looks like on set when we're capturing images like the one you see on the thumbnail for this video. And I guess it's the reason you clicked on this video to kind of see how it is that we create those images. But one of the main aspects or points of emphasis for capturing this style of image is to cut out all the ambient light on set outside of what it is that we want to record. If we have any kind of ambient going on, it's just going to lower the impact of what it is that we're capturing. So when we're opening the shutter in the camera for half a second to a second or maybe even longer, the sensor is just going to collect whatever light is out there for it to collect. So we want to control all aspects of that. And if we're using certain colors, then that's all we want on this type of a setup. And as you can see here and in the final images, we were using a red color to kind of match the flash theme of this uniform. But I like to use more than one color because I feel like one color, the images are kind of flat. And so for this one, I brought in some blue, as you can see in the overhead up here. And then the key light is also a blue light. Both of these have Pro Light mods on them to reflect in the helmet. So it's not just a large strip of light. And this gives us kind of that stadium feel with those modifiers, and this being a football uniform kind of plays in with that. All right, so let's try this with a little more light. I brought in a light here to kind of light us up. So hopefully these cameras can pick up what I'm talking about as I walk through this setup. I am going to use this little guy here for certain aspects that this one might not be able to pick up. So hopefully I can cover everything that y'all want to see in this setup. And let me say too real quick that when I look at the analytics of this channel, I noticed that at least half, if not more of y'all aren't subscribed who view the content I put up here. And if you like this content, you hit that subscribe button. It's free to do. It really helps me out on this channel. Hopefully one of these days I'll have enough subscribers where I'll have some other equipment manufacturers that'll help me out with some gear that I can show y'all, like the DJI gimbal here, which is tracking me on this setup. Pretty cool tech that I love to be able to make some videos and show that type of content to y'all in the future. So anyway, enough of that. Let's kind of jump through here and I'll show you what I had going on to create the images that we've been talking about. On the key light here, I've got a 1x3 strip with the Pro Light mods on here. I added the Pro Light mods, gives us that stadium light effect. So I have them here and I have them in my overhead, which is also a 1x3 strip as well. These two lights have the blue flexi gel in there. As I mentioned earlier, I like to use at least two different colors to add dimension to images like this where I'm really, color is a major part of the final result. So these are the sources of the blue lights now, or the blue color. All right, so now let's jump to what I had on the edges of my player in this case. And so what I did is I brought in two 1x4 strips on either side. These are being powered by the new FJ800 strobes, which I'm becoming a big fan of. And I've got the grids on these lights. When you're recording light like this, and the light is the major factor of what your camera sensor is recording, and if you've got light just going everywhere on your setup, it's going to make it a lot harder in post to isolate what it is that you're wanting to show off. So I am restricting and controlling the light output on these modifiers to really focus it in on the subject and what it is that I want to record. So you'll see I've also got these strips tandem up with some RGB lights from Amaran. These are the 150Cs. You can see that there. And I can dial with these RGB LED lights, I can dial them into whatever color I want. So I was able to pretty much match them up pretty closely to the flexi gels that I've got going there. And then finally I've got up top two of the FJ200s, one on either side. They don't have flexi gels that fit those lights, so I've just got some Roscoe red gels, kind of old school on those. And as I back up here, you can see the 3-light combo that I was working on either side of my subject. And I've done this in the past with less lights. I did this I guess back in like 2017 with the Carolina football team here. And I believe I was just using probably, 2 lights on either side. One thing that you've got to remember too is with the colors, with the gels on these strobes, I've got them, working the modeling lamps for the color gel, but then that gel is also on those when they flash. If I, basically was using the RGBs and then didn't have the strip boxes gelled or the strobes gelled, when it flashed the white light, it would just wash out that color. So it's really important to gel your strobes, and whether or not you want to use constant lights, in conjunction with those lights is kind of up to you. I hadn't done that before, so I wanted to experiment with that. And let me say too, on that note, that just like any process when you're using light with the camera sensor, you can overexpose or have too much light. And when I started with those RGBs, I had them up to probably 30% or so, and it was too much. And the first couple sample images that I looked at when they came across, I could tell that it was just too much light. So I dialed those down to, I'm pretty sure they're right around 5%. So it really didn't take much based off of the camera settings to get the effects that we were wanting to get. And it's just kind of walking that line of how much color is too much color. And you get too much color, you start losing the contrast. And another aspect of that is employing the grids on these lights to concentrate that light on the subject, not getting it all back on the backdrop and that type of thing, which then would have made it a lot harder in post to do. And we'll take a look at that here toward the end of the video. But now let's jump to, let me turn this off. Let's jump to the camera settings. So I've gotten a lot of questions since I posted up these images on Instagram, and a lot of people want to know, about the camera settings and how you make this work. Let me just turn this on so I can run through exactly kind of how I had this set up. And it's going to change though, especially the shutter speed is going to change based off of what it is that you want to do. The settings that were pretty much constant were, my f-stop was at f4.5 and my ISO was at 200. Now I've had some comments of people that have tried this, I guess, in the past, and the lights they were using, and maybe they were using modeling lamps on their strobes, they didn't feel like they were bright enough to get what they wanted to get. And that's a case where maybe you just need to jack up your ISO to, increase the power of the lights, within the camera, or you might need to adjust your shutter speed. So based off of the movement that the setup, what I was trying to capture during this photo shoot, I would adjust the shutter speed, and I was probably ranging from half a second to a full second, depending on the movement and what we were trying to do. And it was something that as results would come across onto the computer, then I would make modifications as we went. Sometimes I would shorten up that shutter speed, and sometimes I would make it a little bit longer, like I said, depending on what it was that we're doing. And let me just say too that is a huge tool that I like to use on most of my photo shoots, but something like this, it really aids in the feedback of what you're getting. So I'm using the Tether Tools cable. This is one of their new cables here that they just came out with, and the lever lock system on the bottom of the camera. Make sure I'll knock it off. So what this does is, it sends the image over there to my laptop, gives us a bigger screen to see exactly what's going on. Client can stand over there and watch the results as they come across, and you'll see some of the behind the scenes stuff that I captured. And it really does aid in how you go about capturing the images and doing this type of process. So let's talk about that too. On my camera, I'm using the 24-105. So it gives me some nice zoom on here, and as you'll see in some of these results, that's what I was using to capture some of the setups. So the one kind of I guess the cover image almost for this setup was where I had our player holding up the gloves there that had the Flash logo on them, and then I was zooming. You would think I was zooming in, but I was actually zooming out, and that has to do with the fact that I was shooting in rear curtain, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. But so it was a combination of camera movement, camera zoom, like whether I was panning or doing some tilts or zooming with the lens, and then in conjunction to what it was that I had our subject doing. So when he was moving, a lot of times I'm just trying to keep him in frame, or I'm kind of panning with him, that type of thing. And all of that adds into the effect. And the cool thing about this process is every frame is going to be different. So when you're watching them come across, you really just have to kind of pay attention, see what's working, what isn't working, and then kind of dial it in. Another thing you have to be aware of is your focus. When you're making lateral movements, kind of horizontal to the camera, once you press the shutter here, your camera sets focus. And if you're at like a second shutter speed, you're going to have blackout on here. And so you're going to have to do a couple different things in that. When that is happening, you're going to have to make sure you're keeping your subject in frame and then in focus. And that's where you might need. I was at 4.5, so I probably could have made things a little bit easier on myself by either raising the power of my lights or raising my ISO, and then changing my aperture to like 5.6 or 6.3. But we obviously made it work. We made it work. The movements you got to pay attention to are the ones that are kind of leaving that focal plane. So if your subject is moving straight at the camera, you might have to switch to manual focus, set focus on that endpoint, have them reset, and then go through the motion. And then so when your camera captures that, they will be in focus. So when we're talking about camera movements, you can do all different ones. You can do, like I said, your subject can stay still, and you can do pans, and then that will kind of leave the streaks along, and then the flash will fire on the rear curtain setup and freeze where your subject was at that moment. Or you can do tilts, which I got a really neat image of the cleat in one of them where I was doing a tilt, and it almost kind of has this anti-gravity type effect. And what was cool too is the theme of this was something out of a comic book. So we could really go outside the realms of believability, I guess, when it comes to the creative on this. So it really opened up some stuff and played into this concept in a big way, which made it a lot of fun. All right, so let's talk about setting, and this is a big question I get, let's talk about setting up rear curtain, front curtain on your camera. And it will depend on the brand of camera. I believe Sony, you can set it in the camera with the Canon R5 and the R5 Mark II like I have here. Unless they update the firmware, you don't have that option for rear curtain in the camera, and that's where you end up relying on the remote for your strobes. And this is the Westcott remote, obviously controlling my Westcott lights. I know Godox allows you to do the same thing with their remote, and the newer Pro Photo remotes will allow you to set rear curtain on your remote. So you just need to look at the manual on your remote, find the mode. Like the Westcott is super easy, and you just set it that way. You can also sometimes set it on your strobes, but if you're using a remote, the remote is going to basically set the mode itself and direct your strobes on how to fire. All right, so let's talk about the difference in front curtain and rear curtain for those that might not know. The curtain is when the shutter actually, or when the strobes fire, and that is the front curtain. When you push the shutter button, the remote will tell the strobes to fire, right at that moment. And then based off of what your shutter speed is, it will remain open for the rest of that time. So if you have like a 1 second duration on your shutter, on front curtain, you hit your shutter, it fires, and then the shutter on your camera remains open for the rest of that time. So you're basically freezing the action from the front part, the front curtain, and then you're recording the color data, in this case, afterwards. Now, what I was using for this setup, it was the rear curtain sync. And so when I would push the shutter button, the camera would open, start recording the color information that I had going on in front of it. And then right before it closed, it would fire the strobe. So I was recording the color and then freezing the action at the end. And that worked better for what we were doing, trying to capture that motion. Once you get it set, it's just a matter of watching the results on the computer in this case, or the back of your camera, and then fine-tuning what it is you're doing. Like I said, if you capture everything properly in camera, the post work is pretty minimal. And so when I bring these images over into post, for these images right here, I really only had to adjust maybe a little bit of the clarity, some contrast, adjusting maybe the blacks and highlights, just working the sliders in Camera Raw. You have the same type thing in Lightroom as well. And then with a subject like this where we needed to make sure the colors were close to being correct, since this was these are licensed renditions of the flash. So I want to make sure that the color was close to where it needed to be. So made a couple adjustments there. And then the fact that this is based off of a comic book, really, left things open for a lot of creativity, and can really kind of boost the colors somewhat just because of the subject matter. And that made, these results just a lot of fun to put together. All right, so I hope I covered most everything that y'all might have sent me questions about. And if I didn't, or if there's something that, you still have a question about, drop those down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to try and answer it. It really comes down to, getting things set up correctly, and then just practicing, seeing what's working and what isn't working. So take that in consideration when you're thinking about doing this type of photo shoot. So with all that being said, if you did find this video worthy, please hit that thumbs up for me. Like I said earlier, if you like this type of content, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out on YouTube. In the meantime, you can find me on social media at quantzphoto on Instagram, as well as at ProLightMods on Instagram. Y'all stay safe and healthy out there, and I'll see y'all again soon in the next one.